What if I told you Diddy's team might be playing the biggest trick of all time? New lawsuits, bizarre stories about high-speed deliveries, and legal games that sound straight out of a movie. But here's the kicker. What if these stories aren't meant to expose him, but to protect him? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because we're about to break down how Diddy could be flipping the script on everyone, and why the next few days might decide if he walks free or finally faces the music. Alright, let's start with this new lawsuit that just hit the headlines. And honestly, the details are so wild, they almost sound like a bad Netflix script. According to court filings, Diddy's former associate Brendan Paul is accused of being a mule back in 2015. The claim? That he jumped on a high-performance motorcycle in Ohio, gunned it all the way down to Florida at speeds of 200 miles an hour, and delivered kilos of hard stuff straight into the heart of Diddy's circle. Now on paper, that sounds dramatic. But here's the thing, the timeline makes absolutely no sense. Brendan Paul only started working for Diddy around 2022, and if you rewind the clock back to 2015, the guy was still in high school. Do the math. He would have been around 15 or 16 years old at the time. You're telling me a teenager hopped on a bike, rode overnight at breakneck speed, dodged police surveillance with thermal blankets, and delivered kilos across state lines? And it gets stranger. The lawsuit also claims that Christian Combs, Diddy's son, was the one who got Paul the job through Instagram DMs. But again, Christian himself would have been around 16 years old back then. And let's be real, does anyone really believe Diddy was trusting his teenage son to recruit drug couriers for his empire? Even if you're willing to suspend disbelief for a second, the logistics don't check out. The alleged deal was worth just $20,000 for a kilo, way below street value at the time. That's like claiming a Ferrari was sold at used Honda prices. It doesn't add up. And yet this lawsuit doesn't stop at the delivery claim. It goes further, describing Brendan Paul as not just a courier, but someone spotted inside one of Diddy's notorious events later that same night. The accuser says Paul was laughing and joking while Diddy, Jay-Z, and others carried out violent acts. Here's the takeaway. The lawsuit is packed with sensational details, but when you line up the ages, the timelines, and the numbers, it starts to look less like a smoking gun and more like smoke and mirrors. Now here's where things get really interesting. If this lawsuit sounds shaky to you, you're not alone. A lot of people are starting to believe this might not even be about finding justice. It could be about muddying the waters. Think about it. Every time Diddy gets hit with a real serious accusation backed up by evidence, something like this pops up in the media. A case with outrageous claims, wild timelines, and easy-to-disprove details. And once it's out there, what happens? The public starts saying, man, all these lawsuits sound crazy, maybe none of them are true. And that benefits exactly one person, Diddy. Because right now, Diddy is fighting for his life in court. He's facing a pre-sentencing report that could completely shape how much time he spends behind bars. And if that report paints him as violent, manipulative, and out of control, which, let's be real, a lot of evidence already suggests, then the judge is going to have no problem throwing the book at him. So what does his legal team want? They want noise. They want confusion. They want lawsuits that are so messy and unbelievable that by the time the real charges land, people can't tell fact from fiction. And that's exactly what this Brendan Paul lawsuit feels like. Let's be honest, if the accuser really saw a 15-year-old kid running kilos across state lines at 200 miles an hour, why didn't this come up back then? Why now? When Diddy's legal empire is crumbling, it's almost too convenient. And that's why so many believe this is a red herring, a distraction designed to help Diddy's team spin the story and say, look, people are just making things up. But here's the thing, no matter how wild these side lawsuits get, the real cases, the ones backed by testimony, evidence, and years of investigative work, aren't going away. And Diddy knows it. That's why he's scrambling behind the scenes, trying every trick in the book to save himself before sentencing day arrives. Alright, so let's talk about the one thing that has Diddy sweating bullets more than any lawsuit, more than any headline, and more than any blog post, the pre-sentencing report. Now if you don't know, this isn't just some formality. This report is basically like a report card on your entire life and character, prepared for the judge before sentencing. And trust me, it carries serious weight. Here's how it works. Investigators interview people close to you, people you've worked with, even people you've hurt. They dig into your past, your patterns, your behavior. They pull records, statements, evidence, everything. And when it's all said and done, they hand the judge a detailed breakdown of who you really are. And here's the kicker. The jury's opinion doesn't matter here. This isn't about convincing 12 people who might be confused or swayed. This is about hard evidence and expert recommendations. If the report says you're a danger, the judge takes that seriously. If it says you've shown violence, manipulation, or abuse over time, the judge can justify handing you the harshest sentence possible. And let's be real, Diddy has already admitted to things that are going to look terrible on paper: violence, coercion, Intimidation. Even if the jury lets certain charges slide, that doesn't erase the fact that those actions are now on record, and you better believe they'll be highlighted in that report. That's why Diddy's legal team is fighting for more time. They know once that report drops, it could lock him into a future he can't escape. They want those extra days to pick it apart, to try and argue against it, and to soften the blow before the judge lays down the sentence. Because once that pre-sentencing report hits, there's no spinning, no distractions, no red herrings. It's just the truth, laid out in black and white. And for someone like Diddy, who's built an empire on image control and keeping the worst secrets buried, that's the one thing he can't afford. Now here's where it gets even messier. Diddy's lawyers aren't just stalling for time, they're actually pushing for a whole new trial. Why? Because if they can't erase the pre-sentencing report, their next best option is to limit what the judge can even consider. See, in the original trial, a lot of the ugliest details came out. Stories of violence, manipulation, intimidation. And while some of that didn't technically fit into the specific charges, it still painted Diddy as dangerous. That matters when you're trying to convince a judge to go easy on you. So now his team wants to argue that those details should never have been included in the first place. They're basically saying, forget all the stories about violence. Let's just stick to the narrowest definition of the charges. If the judge agrees, that could mean a lighter sentence or even time served. And here's the chess move. If they get a new trial under those limits, it's like wiping the slate clean. All the headlines about violent behavior, gone. All the witnesses who spoke about being threatened, erased. The jury would only see a watered-down version of the case. But think about that for a second. If Diddy's team is fighting this hard to strip away the context, what does that really say? It says they know the truth looks bad. It says they know the full picture makes him look guilty as hell. And it says they're willing to fight tooth and nail just to keep the ugliest parts out of the spotlight. Because here's the reality, the jury may have been swayed before, but judges don't play the same game. They don't care about charm or reputation, or how many platinum records you've sold. They care about the facts. And if the facts show a pattern of abuse and control, the sentencing is going to reflect that. So when you see Diddy's team filing motions, demanding extra days, or suddenly amplifying crazy lawsuits that don't even make sense, it's not random, it's strategy. They're building smokescreens, trying to make everything so confusing that people stop believing any of it. But no matter how many distractions they throw, that pre-sentencing report is still sitting there. And unless they win that new trial, it could be the nail in the coffin. Now let's talk about these wild lawsuits popping up out of nowhere. Because if you've been paying attention, you'll notice a pattern. Some of these claims sound so bizarre, so over the top, that they almost seem designed to make the whole case look like a circus. Take that story about Brendan Paul allegedly making drug runs at 200 miles an hour from Ohio to Florida back in 2015. Do the math. The guy would have been a teenager in high school at the time, and yet the lawsuit paints him as some international transporter, riding through the night like a character out of an action movie. Come on. Now why would something that obviously far-fetched even make it into the headlines? Because it muddies the water. It makes people throw their hands up and say, well, if that part isn't true, maybe none of it is. And that's exactly what Diddy's team wants. This is classic smokescreen strategy. You flood the media with so many ridiculous claims that the real ones start to look less believable. It's the old boy who cried wolf effect, except this time it's being used as a legal defense. And let's be real, Diddy has the money, the connections, and the media influence to make that happen. He doesn't even have to prove these lawsuits. All he needs to do is let them circulate long enough for doubt to creep in. And once doubt is in the room, it becomes harder to convince a judge or the public that the other claims are serious. But here's the kicker. While we're all focused on these headlines about motorcycles, drugs, and wild stories, the real issues are happening behind closed doors. The pre-sentencing report, the motions for a new trial, the appeals being quietly drafted in the background. Those are the moves that will actually decide Diddy's future. So ask yourself, are these crazy lawsuits just coincidence, or is someone deliberately planting them to distract us from the real fight? Because if you look at the timing, every time something big is about to happen in court, a new outrageous lawsuit magically appears in the news cycle. Coincidence? Maybe. Strategy? More likely. And here's where the story takes a turn. In Section 5, we saw how Diddy's team is using lawsuits and distractions to muddy the waters. But behind all that noise, there's something they can't meme away, they can't bribe away, and they can't spin away: the pre-sentencing report. Think of this as the part of the game Diddy can't control. It's not about flashy lawyers or slick PR headlines. This is a deep dive into his entire record, every violent outburst, every coercive act, every whispered allegation he thought was buried. Probation officers don't just skim, they interview witnesses, comb through old files, talk to friends, even enemies. Nothing is off the table. And this is why it's keeping Diddy up at night. Unlike a jury trial where charisma and confusion can win the day, this report is cold, clinical, and permanent. Once it's written, it paints a picture of who you are, not who your lawyers say you are. And with Diddy already on record admitting to violent behavior, the report is almost guaranteed to mark him as a repeat danger to society. Judges don't play with that. No one wants to be remembered as the judge who went soft on a celebrity predator. That's exactly why Diddy's team is begging for more time. They know once this report lands, it will follow him straight into sentencing, and the judge will have little choice but to act. So while the public is distracted by flashy headlines, the real battle is happening in the background. And make no mistake, if this report nails Diddy as a violent, manipulative repeat offender, it could end his freedom for good. But Diddy's team isn't just waiting around. Oh no, they've got another card to play, and it's one they're hoping will flip the entire case upside down. And just when you think the pre-sentencing report has Diddy cornered, his legal team tries to flip the board. Their latest move? A motion for a brand new trial. Now, here's why this matters. In the original trial, a lot of damaging evidence about Diddy's violence and coercion was allowed to slip in, even though the jury wasn't convinced enough to hit him with harsher charges like trafficking or RICO. But with a new trial, Diddy's lawyers want to wipe that slate clean. They're fighting to make sure the jury only hears about the narrowest piece of the case, the Mann Act charge, while everything else, all the violent outbursts and confessions, gets shoved off the table. If they succeed, Diddy's entire sentence could shrink to practically time served. Imagine that. After years of accusations, lawsuits, and headlines, the man could walk away almost untouched. That's why this motion is so critical. It's not just a legal maneuver, it's a Hail Mary pass to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But here's the transition. If the motion fails, then the weight of the pre-sentencing report from Section 6 slams down like a hammer. Diddy knows this. His lawyers know this. That's why they're pouring everything into convincing the judge that the first trial was flawed. And the stakes couldn't be higher, because if this motion is denied, the next step is sentencing, and that's where things get very real, very fast. And this is where it all comes to a head. Sentencing day. No more delays, no more motions, no more clever tricks in the courtroom. This is the moment where Judge Aaron has the power to decide if Diddy spends years behind bars or if he somehow slips out with little more than a slap on the wrist. And let's be clear, the sentencing isn't just about what the jury said. It's about everything that came out in the pre-sentencing report. Every story of violence, every confession of control, every accusation that painted him as a man who believed he was untouchable. The prosecution will argue that Diddy is too dangerous to walk free, pointing to his history of manipulation, his empire built on intimidation, and his pattern of dodging accountability. On the other side, Diddy's lawyers will beg for leniency, painting him as a misunderstood mogul who's already suffered enough in the public eye. But here's the truth. The whole industry is watching. Other lawsuits, civil claims, and even federal investigations are lined up behind this case like dominoes. Whatever happens in this courtroom could spark a chain reaction across the entire music world. And fans? They're split down the middle. Some believe Diddy is about to face the justice that's been chasing him for decades. Others think he'll pull one last magic trick and dodge the punishment yet again. So as the judge prepares to deliver the sentence, the question is no longer just about Diddy's future. It's about the future of hip-hop itself. If one of its biggest power players finally falls, who's next? The gavel comes down, and just like that, the world reacts. Inside the courtroom, you could hear a pin drop. Outside, absolute chaos. Reporters rushing to break the headline, fans flooding timelines, and industry insiders scrambling to distance themselves from Diddy's name. If the sentence is heavy, it's the end of an era. Diddy, the man who built Bad Boy, who danced in shiny suits on MTV, who turned himself into a billionaire mogul, reduced to an inmate number. The ripple effects hit immediately. Business deals collapse, partnerships cut ties, artists who once stayed silent suddenly start speaking out. It becomes open season on the truth. But if the sentence is light, or even overturned, the shockwaves are just as powerful. Fans cry foul, civil cases explode, and critics accuse the system of protecting another powerful figure. It might feel like a win for Diddy in the short term, but in the court of public opinion, he may never recover. And don't forget, this isn't happening in a vacuum. Other names have been whispered, other cases are waiting in the wings. With Diddy on the stand, the spotlight could shift to people we never expected. Some insiders are already asking, if Diddy can be touched, who's next? One thing is clear, no matter the outcome, this trial will be remembered as a turning point. The moment where hip-hop's glossy empire collided with the ugly truths behind the scenes. And the fallout? We're only just beginning to see it. So here we are. The smoke hasn't even cleared, and already the world is split. Some say Diddy's downfall was inevitable. The receipts were always there. Others think this is just another chapter in a long game of power, politics, and money, where the truth might never fully surface. But the real question is this: does this mark the end of Diddy's empire? Or is it just the beginning of a much bigger storm that could pull in more names, more cases, and more secrets? What do you think? Will Diddy walk free, or is this finally the moment he pays the price? Drop your thoughts and wildest theories in the comments, because this story is far from over, and trust me, the next twists are already on the horizon. And hey, before you go, if you're into deep dives that cut past the headlines and bring you the raw, unfiltered truth about the culture, then hit that subscribe button right now. We're building a community here at Fame Insight, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Stay locked in, stay curious, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.